Dr. Louise Spiral Bright Insight. I'm a galactic and an intuitive astrologer, and I want to just talk about well, give you an energy update through this video, and also talk about and share some of the astrology that we have got coming up this weekend. So if I start with an energy check-in, I'm going to really share what I have been feeling, what has been coming up for me, because that's really all I know to be true. So it's my truth, but I hope that what I share is going to resonate with some of you. And please do share, how this week and how things are for you, because it's always really helpful, I think, for others to read, especially when they can read that actually, other people are going through similar things, and they're not on their own, and they're not going crazy. So we are still kind of in the hangover of the full moon in Scorpio, which was on Monday. So it was a couple of days ago, but this full moon was incredibly powerful. It was deep. It was intense. Scorpio always requires us to feel the feels, to go into the depths of our emotions, to see what is hidden and buried beneath the surface. And, for this one in particular, it felt like we have been able to access a lot of which has been really deeply buried, almost compressed. And that is because of the opposition with Uranus to the full moon. Uranus and Taurus next to the sun was really shaking everything up. And I think Uranus and Taurus has got that job to do. At this time, he's getting to the end of his transit in Taurus, and it is really about being able to kind of shake up that fixed earth in order that we can start to access what we have really been sitting on. And this is, the deep, dark, dirty stuff that it's much easier to just leave be, just to ignore, to bury down. And that tends to be what we do with emotions that we don't feel comfortable with, or we just don't want to look at or deal with or process. We tend to just bury them, conceal them. If they're deep down, we don't need to worry about them. But this full moon has been saying to us, no, you can't do that anymore, because that is only going to create a lot of aggravation and issues and problems in the long term. It's time to really bring that up. So there has been a lot coming to the surface, and it hasn't been comfortable. So if you've been sort of finding that you've had old things coming back again, you think, God, I thought I dealt with this, how can this be coming back again? How can this be on my radar? How can I be worrying and thinking and sort of, having to deal with and face this again? I thought I'd done it. It's because there is still residual stuff to process, to release, to transmute. And, the universe is just making sure that we do it really well and completely and thoroughly, because we're not going to have another chance to do it. This is kind of the end game. Saturn is now at 29 degrees of Pisces. Saturn is the master, the lessons. He wants to make sure that we do the work, that we are very thorough. And in this final degree point, which is all about surrendering, which is about letting go, which is about releasing, but it's also about having conscious closure on so many cycles, so many emotions, so many lessons that may have been playing out over lifetimes. Saturn is saying this is the time when we just bring everything to a close. So there is a real sense of a very heavy karmic weight that is coming up through all the emotions that are being released, that are being unlocked, and that are having to come to the surface. We are having to feel it all, and it is deep. These emotions are not necessarily nice to deal with, but it is important that we feel it all. So if you've been feeling extremely emotional, and I speak for myself, I have been feeling very emotional all week. Anxiety has been a real problem, but I know that there's been a lot of solar activity. There have been a lot of flares. There have been a lot of earthquakes, and as sensitives, we are going to be really in tune with that. So even if it's not in your locality, in your immediate environment, there is a frequency that you are in tune with. And as empaths, we are very much kind of affected by that. So if you have been feeling emotional, anxious, unsettled, then it is likely that you're tuning into the collective, and also to Earth, to Gaia's frequency and all the kind of shifting that she is experiencing at this time. Scorpio is emotional. It's very sensitive. So, there's a lot of sort of vulnerability coming up, very tender. You might be feeling tender, you might be feeling raw. There's also a lot of grief coming up. And I'm going to talk about series as part of this video. But, for me, it has felt at times this week as if I am losing everything. And again, it feels sometimes I think, gosh, Louise, don't be so dramatic. You're not at all. But it is the emotion of losing things, of people, of situations, just, leaving my life, which again, when I sort of managed to come back into a center point and think about it, and sit with it, it's like, actually, no, it's not. It just feels like that. And I think it's because I'm very conscious that things are changing, and this is permanent change. We're not going back to a lot of what we have been, what we've had, how things have been. Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces is saying, no, this change is going to be permanent. There is a lot of grief that comes up with that, and it's about being able to feel it, not ignore it, not try and shy away from it or deny it, to accept that's what it is. And also, I've talked about this a couple of times lately, but I think the higher self and the mind as well, often we are presented with situations that are going to trigger a reaction, that are going to trigger an emotion. And it's not necessarily a real situation or a real story. It may feel real, it may look real, it may appear real, but actually when you drill down into it, it isn't. It's just something that your mind has created to trigger a response, to bring up an emotion so that you can feel that emotion. And once you've felt that emotion, once you've allowed it to come in, often, as I've said before, the fun, nice, joyful emotions aren't an issue. It's the ones that feel really ick, that feel comfortable, that you just, those are the tricky ones. But it's those more that I would say we have to bring in and sit with. And often, there will come a point where it's overwhelming and you just think, oh my God, I can't, deal with this. But if you sit with it and allow it to come right in, instead of ignoring it, denying it, suppressing it, rejecting or whatever, allow it to come right in. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience here, because this has happened to me on several occasions now. It's like it's like going through over the threshold, or it's like a rite of passage, or that sort of pushing through that block of that barrier. It becomes so loud, so strong, so real, so overwhelming, and then it's gone. And the freedom and the relief and the light that comes in through that process is something that I have experienced several times recently, especially with the darker, the more shadow aspects and the trickier emotions. And again, I'm sharing that, just in the hope that that is going to help some people watching this video, again, because it has been my experience. But we are being cracked open. We are having to, deal with the karmic stuff, the stuff that is coming around again, to be sort of seen and felt. And it does feel that so much is slipping through my fingers, our collective fingers. And, that's scary. That brings up fear. That brings up panic. If you feel like everything is leaving and you're losing everything, the question is, or the feeling is, oh my God, but what will I have left? And that has been coming up for me a lot. But I feel that is part of the process, because things are changing and we do have to let go, and that does take courage. But it's about having trust and the faith that comes through this Pisces energy as well, that will see us through. So let's talk about what is coming. That's all quite heavy. And, yeah, like I said, it's an intense week. But let's talk about what's coming up at the weekend. So Saturday is a really, really big day. We have got a Uranus Cazimi, and that is when the Sun meets Uranus at exactly the same point. Now, that's going to be at 27 degrees of Taurus. And whenever there is a Cazimi, basically the light and the power of the Sun amplifies the planet that it is conjoining, that it is merging, that is blending with, and it gets a real boost. So the heart of the Sun basically moves across or through or into Uranus, which is the planet of awakening, of chaos, of discord, of shock, of liberation, of freedom, of awakening, and of enlightenment, and gives it a huge boost. So there are there's lots of different possibilities with this, and obviously, astrology, it's more about the themes, it's more about the energies that we're working with rather than predicting specific events. But it does feel as if there is the potential for something quite unexpected, quite shocking. Uranus can be a lightning bolt coming down, completely unexpected, designed to wake up, to shock people awake. It's almost like an electric shock, almost like the defibrillator. If you have been sleeping dormant, it's like, it's time to, something's potentially going to happen. And again, this can be at a personal level or it can be at a collective level, often as within, so without. But it does feel as if we're likely to have a sudden light bulb, a shock, a flash of insight, a flash of awareness. It could be, I know a lot of intuitives are talking about the energy of the sun building, the flares building. There might be power outages. That is possible. There could be disruption to our resources because Taurus does represent our resources and what we need to feel safe. So yes, that is possible. And again, it's useful to be aware of it. And pre-warned, pre-armed, etc. is always better than completely, in the dark. But so, there is likely to be disruption. It could be energetic disruption. It could be at a physical, tangible, practical level. We are talking about fixed Earth through Taurus. But there is going to be amplified energy, and it is designed to shake us out of the status quo, to create some disruption and chaos potentially, but as a route to awakening, to higher consciousness, to enlightenment. Now, at the same time as we've got the Uranus Cazimi, we will also have the moon at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Now that creates a trine, an earth trine. And Capricorn is, of course, Saturn's ruling planet. Saturn is at 29 degrees of Pisces. So Saturn is sextile the Uranus Cazimi. So lending some... It's difficult for Saturn to create structure because he's in Pisces, and Pisces is literally just dissolving everything and blurring the lines and, making boundaries really difficult. But there is a sense of mastery, of maturity, and also kind of the wise father energy holding space. It is likely to feel quite emotional, I would say, with the moon in trine, but the moon is making sure that we do allow the emotions to flow. Now, Capricorn and emotions, not always, very compatible, because Capricorn can be quite, strong and strict and holds everything in, holds everything together. But there's also a sense of, coming into a state of mastery and maturity, and that higher wisdom. I always see Capricorn as the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, because it sits at the top of the chart. It's as high as you can go when you're going around the wheel. Capricorn is at the top. So it's like, yes, it is very karmic, whatever is happening, this is by design, it's meant to happen. But we also need to make sure, as we are closing a chapter, for sure that we feel everything, because it is through connecting to the emotion of what is going on that we get the biggest growth and the biggest lessons. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind or pointing out that the Cazimi is at 27 degrees of Taurus. The moon is going to be at 27 degrees of Capricorn. If you combine the 2 and the 7 together, you get the 9. And so that adds an extra layer of closure, of completion, coming to the end of the cycle. We are also in a 9-year. I talked about that a lot, as have many other astrologers and intuitives. 9 really is getting to the end, where we complete things, we bring everything to a close in order to create space to welcome in the new. So that feels very relevant. Something is happening we are having to let go. We are having to move forward, but it feels like a rite of passage. It feels like something that we have worked very hard to get to. And with the moon in Capricorn, it's like, you have to really put the effort in, just keep going, keep climbing, keep going, keep persevering, keep that resilience, that tenacity, and just keep pushing on through. And that's what it feels like. So whatever is happening in terms of the energies with Uranus, the awakening, with the light of the sun, with the support of the moon in Capricorn, with all the nine energy, it does feel very karmic, very real. It's likely to affect our real world, but it also feels like, it has to happen. And it's something that we have been waiting for. And actually, at soul level, we are more than ready for it, even if it is going to create some disruption at a physical human level. From a soul perspective, we know that this has to take place and we're ready for it. We are prepared. We've got to the point where we have got that spiritual maturity, we have got the spiritual mastery, and we are ready to take that step and move forward, regardless of what happens and how these energies show up. Now, the other interesting thing is that the Sphinx, which is one of the asteroids I've talked about quite a lot, that's at 25 degrees of Capricorn. So that is going to be sort of part of this trine. The Sphinx is very much ancient wisdom. I see the Sphinx again, it represents a rite of passage. It's a journey, but to get access to be able to move forward and to go to where you need to go, you need to be able to ask the right question and give the right answer. So this is about very ancient wisdom coming through from other lifetimes that we might need to call on or delve down deep and access and dredge up in order to be able to move forward. There's this sense as well of, cyclical nature, things constantly coming around to help us to move forward. And the other star energy that I wanted to bring into this as well is the Alphard, which is the Hydra star. Now, Alphard sits at 27 degrees of Leo. So Alphard is going to be square to the Uranus Cazimi. And this is very much about awakening, spiritual awakening. Alphard is the water serpent, or Hydra is the water serpent. So this is snake energy, which of course, we are in the year of the snake. Very much about awakening to our potential, to that hidden or dormant or trapped energy, the Kundalini energy that sits at the base of the spine. Once it's released, it unleashes our creativity, our sexual energy, our potential, and is deeply empowering. It helps us to connect to nature, to the cycles, to the understanding that everything is a cycle. It also helps us to bring together the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies, but particularly the divine feminine and all that ancient wisdom of the divine feminine, which has been repressed, which has been hidden. But it may have seemed to be dormant, but actually it has always been there, ever present, and it is time for that to be brought back in, to be awakened, to be reconnected and reactivated. And Alphard, is really going to help us to do that. And I've talked about, the potential for spontaneous spiritual awakening, certainly with Uranus and Alphard. This is kind of prime time, prime energy for that to happen. And the other thing I love about Alphard is because of the sort of the layout of Hydra. It's a long water snake. Alphard sits in the middle, quite isolated, quite on its own. It's called the Lone Star or the Heart Star, and it's really beautiful because when you're working with Alphard, it means you can stay in your own lane because there's not a lot of other kind of energies around. So there's nothing to influence or to distract or to overpower you. You can stand in your own heart, in your own space, in your own energy field, and you can show up as you and be true to you. And again, that feels important and significant in terms of what happens next and where we're going. We need to take that with us. And with Uranus squaring Alphard and the sun there, it feels like we're going to awaken to the truth of that, and that is something that we will be able to carry forward. Because of course, it's not just the Cazimi, it's not just this trine with the moon and with the Sphinx or the 9 energy. We also have Ceres moving into Aries on Saturday. Now, I've talked about Ceres in a recent video, the fact that she is holding hands at this time with Saturn. They're at the final point. It feels like, they are about to move forward, but they are having to let go. The mother and the father almost watching us sort of spread our wings and fly the nest. Ceres is going to move across that threshold into the 0 point to be reborn herself. And she's got a lot to teach us. So Ceres is the archetypal Earth Mother, the goddess of the harvest, of fertility. She represents the points of transition and the ability to hold space between, one dimension and the other. She was Persephone's mother, so she, had to negotiate with Hades, basically to allow her daughter to come back to the surface, and spend some time on Earth, and other parts of the year she had to stay in the underworld with Hades. So there's a real sort of acknowledgement of, the cycles of time, the rite of passage, the transition, the letting go, the renewal, the rebirth, also sustenance, what we need to keep ourselves nourished and safe, healthy and whole in this world. And as she moves into Aries, she is associated with grief and rage and deep compassion and emotion. So the Aries may actually trigger that even more. It may light a spark in us all, because obviously Ceres and Aries is for all of us. It's a collective transit. But it's also reminding us that, as we move forward, we have to be more autonomous, more sovereign. We have to be able to stand on our own feet, to be more independent. And that is part of the rite of passage. That is part of the growing up process. And I am going to do a separate video about Saturn moving into Aries as well, because Saturn moving into Aries is also going to reiterate that theme and that requirement. We have come so far. The next stage, we are moving into a more mature, a more rounded, a more sovereign version of ourselves. And this is part of the process. Ceres is just slightly ahead of Saturn, showing the way, kind of the role model, but bringing in that beautiful feminine, that beautiful mother, and that beautiful wise crone energy as well, because Ceres is the crone. She has been through a lot. She's seen it all. She's felt all the feels. She's had to, let go. She's had to kind of negotiate and come to agreements and, and hold her space. And she has shown how her grief and her rage and her loss can actually change the world, because it said that Ceres actually created the seasons, because when her daughter was allowed to come up, it was spring and summer, and she would provide sustenance and nourishment for everybody. And then when her daughter went into the underworld in autumn and winter, she sat with her grief and her loss. So that, such a beautiful story. But with Ceres and Aries, it's reminding us that we do need to stand on our own sometimes. And, that may be the case if everything feels like it's being stripped away. There is this kind of pioneering. You have to be the hero. You have to set foot, take those steps on your own. And it may feel like you're on your own. And almost that is the rite of passage. But I think what we'll find is as we move forward, we're not alone at all. And it was only an illusion. It was a test. This is like a rite of passage. It's a test of faith. It's also about helping us to reclaim our identity after the loss, after the transition, after everything that we've let go of. We have to start to think about, who are we now? What is this new version of ourselves? We're no longer defined by the Pisces energy, by the sacrifice, by the victimhood. We are coming into much more sovereign versions of ourselves, and Ceres is going to help us to do that. In Aries, she is the warrior. She has got that fight, that spark, that kind of, let's get on with it. But she's also going to help us reclaim all those pieces of ourselves that we've perhaps lost or had stolen, or we've given away to systems, to relationships, to roles that perhaps we were playing, or that we were part of or engaged in, or almost entrapped in, to serve a purpose. But now as we move forward, we're letting go of that. We're going to stand in our true, authentic and possibly very raw and vulnerable state, and we have to work to reclaim all those parts back. And I've said it again, there's been a lot videos where I've talked about reclaiming lost parts. Venus and Mercury have already been back into Pisces and have already done this journey that Ceres is doing, and Saturn is about to. So we have reclaimed lost gifts, lost wisdom, lost understanding, and now it is about working through that grief and seeing that actually, it's the grief and the sorrow and the loss that is the root and the key to reclaiming our power. And the other thing I love about Ceres in Aries is, although she's the mother and she provides and she nourishes and she tends to us and she cares for us, there's almost this sense of, in Aries, it's going to be quite tough love, because we do have to get on with it. We do need to grow up. We do need to stand on our own 2 feet. So, whereas she might have held a space for us, in all that is in Pisces, in Aries, it's going to be no, right now, you've just got to get on with it now and almost grow a pair is kind of the energy that I'm getting. But, she wants us to walk alone. She wants us to be independent. She wants us to fly the nest and feel, that potential and feel the strength to be able to do that. And hopefully, everything that we've learned, all the lessons we've mastered, all the wisdom that we've accumulated and are carrying with us will help us to do that. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope, that you've enjoyed my take on it. Obviously, with astrology, it's especially my intuitive approach, take what kind of resonates. If it doesn't, use your discernment. And again, this is not, the only way to interpret these energies. There's many other ways. But it does feel as if this weekend is going to be incredibly intense. Lots of really strong energies. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Earth does respond, particularly with, the Earth Mother series moving into a new sign. It does feel as if there's going to be some sort of recognition of that. And I'm not trying to fearmonger at all, but I'm sure that you can feel that things are sort of being shaken up and something is definitely building. And when there's a lot of pressure and it keeps building and it keeps building, sometimes something has to give, basically. So just be mindful of that. I think keep being grounded is going to obviously always serve, but trying to find those pockets of stillness and those moments when you can come back and just check in, check that you're breathing properly and that, you are centered as much as you can be, that I feel that is always going to help, regardless of what is going on. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, just know that it is always just in that present moment. It's not going to be eternal. Energy is constantly shifting. Our emotions are constantly shifting. So try and just be with it rather than letting it completely consume. So I hope you will join me and watch my next video, which I am going to record about Saturn and Aries, because there's some beautiful sort of themes to share about that. And just a reminder, if you are not on my mailing list, please do join that. Spiralbright.co.uk is my website. You can sign up there. I will be keeping you updated as to my plans via my newsletter that I send out. And if you're on my mailing list, you'll be the first to hear about the new projects that I have got in the pipeline and that I'm trying to create and give birth to at the moment. Also, just to say and to remind you that I do have a super thanks button. So if you find value in my work, I'm really, really grateful for all donations and contributions that way. Also, there's a PayPal address in the description box below. And please like the video and share it, if you know people that will find this content useful and valuable. I'm really grateful if you are able to support me by sharing my videos as well. So thank you as always for your support. Thank you for commenting, thank you for the amazing emails and the shares and, everything. I really do really value and appreciate everybody that comments and reaches out. So sending lots of love. Let me know how you're feeling. Let's see what the weekend brings. There will be more to share next week, no doubt, because, things are just constantly evolving and changing. But, thanks. I'm going to leave it there. Lots of love.